Welcome back, everybody, to the second reading of the book The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I probably should know how to pronounce his name better, but this book was gifted to me, so I'm just reading it, and hopefully y'all enjoy it too. Hopefully you get something out of it also. If God leads the sheep, oh well. He will also lead a man. That would make he thought, and that made him feel better. The tea seems less bitter. Who are you? That's Santiago speaking. No, it is not, actually. I apologize for that. Who are you? He heard a voice ask him in Spanish. The boy was relieved. He was thinking about omens, and someone had appeared. How come you speak Spanish? He asked. The new arrival was a young man in Western dress, but the color of his skin suggested he was from this city. He was about the same age and height as the boy. Almost everyone here speaks Spanish. We're only 2 hours from Spain. Sit down and let me treat you to something, said the boy, and ask for a glass of wine for me. I hate this tea. There is no wine in this country, the young man said. The religion here forbids it. The boy told him that he needed to get to the pyramids. He almost began to tell him about his treasure, but decided not to do so. If he did, it was possible that the Arab would want part of it as his payment for taking him there. He remembered what the old man had said about offering something you didn't even have yet. I'd already like to I'd like you to take me there if you can. I can pay you to serve as my guide. Do you have any idea how to get there? The newcomer asked. The boy noticed that the owner of the bar stood nearby listening attentively to their conversation. He felt uneasy at the man's presence, but he had found a guide and didn't want to miss out on an opportunity. You have to cross the entire Sahara Desert, said the young man, and to do that, you need money. I need to know whether you have enough. The boy thought it a strange question, but he trusted in the old man, who had said that when you really want something, the universe always conspires in your favor. He took his money from his pouch and showed it to the young man. The owner of the bar came over and looked as well. The two men exchanged some words in Arabic, and the bar owner seemed irritated. Excuse me. Let's get out of here, said the new arrival. He wants to leave. The boy was relieved. He got up to pay the bill, but the owner grabbed him and began to speak in an angry stream of words. The boy was strong and wanted to retaliate, but he was in a foreign country. His new friend pushed the owner aside and pulled the boy outside with him. He wanted your money, he said. Tangier is not like the rest of Africa. This is a port, and every port has its thieves. The boy trusted his new friend. He had helped him out of a dangerous situation. He took out his money and counted it. We could get to the pyramids by tomorrow, said the other, taking the money. But I have to buy 2 camels. They walked together through the narrow streets of Tangier. Everywhere there were walls with items for sale. They reached the center of the large plaza where the market was held. There were thousands of people there, arguing, selling, and buying. Vegetables for sale amongst daggers and carpets displayed alongside tobacco. But the boy never took his eye off his new friend. After all, he had all his money. He thought about asking him to give it back, but decided that would be unfriendly. He knew nothing about the customs of the strange land he was in. I'll just watch him, he said to himself. He knew he was stronger than his friend. Suddenly, there in the midst of all the confusion, he saw the most beautiful sword he had ever seen. The scabbard was embossed in silver, and the handle was black and encrusted with precious stones. The boy promised himself that when he returned from Egypt, he would buy that sword. Ask the owner of the stall how much the sword cost, he said to his friend, and then he realized that he had been distracted for a few moments looking at the sword. His heart squeezed as if his chest had suddenly compressed it. He was afraid to look around because he knew that he knew what he would find. He continued to look at the beautiful sword for a bit longer until he summoned the courage to turn around. All around him was the market, with people coming and going, shouting and buying, and the aroma of strange foods. But nowhere could he find his new companion. The boy wanted to believe that his friend had simply become separated from him by accident. He decided to stay right there and await his return. As he awaited, a priest climbed the top of a nearby tower and began his chant. Everyone in the market fell to their knees, touched their foreheads to the ground, and took up to the chant. Then, like a colony of worker ants, they dismantled their stalls and left. The sun began its departure as well. The boy watched through its trajectory for some time until it was hidden behind the white houses surrounding the plaza. He recalled that when the sun had risen that morning, he was on the other continent, still a shepherd with 60 sheep and looking forward to meeting with a girl. That morning he had known everything that was going to happen to him as he walked through the familiar fields. But now, as the sun began to set, he was in a different country, a stranger in a strange land, where he couldn't even speak the language. He was no longer a shepherd, and he had nothing, not even money to return and start everything over. All this happened between sunrise and sunset. The boy thought he was feeling sorry for himself and lamenting the fact that his life could have changed so suddenly and so drastically. He was ashamed. He was so ashamed that he wanted to cry. He had never even wept in front of his own sheep, but the marketplace was empty and he was far from home, so he wept. He wept because God was unfair and because this was the way God repaid those who believed in their dreams. When I had my sheep, I was happy. When I made those around I made those around me happy. People saw me coming and welcomed me, he thought. But now I am sad and alone. I am going to become bitter and distrustful of people because one person betrayed me. I'm going to hate those who found their treasure because I never found mine. And I'm going to hold on to what little I have because I am too insignificant to conquer the world. He opened his pouch to see what was left in his possessions. Maybe there was a bit left of the sandwich he had eaten up on the ship, but all he found was the heavy book and his jacket and the 2 stones the old man had given him. He looked at the stones and felt relief for some reason. He had exchanged 6 sheep for 2 precious stones that had been taken from a gold breastplate. He could sell the stones and buy a return ticket. But this time I'll be smarter, the boy thought. Removing them from his pouch so he could put them in his pocket. This was a port town, and the only truthful thing his friend told him was that all port towns are full of thieves. Excuse me. Now he understood. Now he understood why the owner of the bar had been so upset. He was trying to tell him not to trust that man. I'm like everyone else. I see the world in terms of what I would like to see happen, not what actually does. He ran his fingers slowly over the stones, sensing the temperature and feeling their surfaces. They were his treasure. Just handling them made him feel better. They reminded him of the old man. When you want something, all the universe conspires to helping you achieve it, he said. The boy was trying to understand the truth of what the old man had said. There he was in an empty marketplace without a cent to his name and without a sheep to guard through the night. But the stones were proof that he had met with a king who knew the boy's past. They were called Urim and Thummim, and they can help you read omens. The boy put the stones back in his pouch and decided to do an experiment. The old man said to ask very clear questions, and to do that. The boy the boy had to know what he wanted. So he asked if the old man's blessing was still with him. He took out the stones. It was yes. And am I going to find my treasure? He took out one of the stones. It was yes. Am I going to find my treasure? He asked, and stuck his hand into the pouch and felt around for one of the stones. As he did so, both of them pushed through a hole in the pouch and fell to the ground. The boy had never even noticed that there was a hole in his pouch. He knelt down to find Urim and Thummim and put them back in the pouch, but he saw them lying there on the ground. Another phrase came to his mind. Learn to recognize omens and follow them, the old king had said. An omen. The boy smiled to himself. He picked up the 2 stones and put them back in his pouch. He didn't consider mending the hole. The stones could fall through at any time they wanted. He had learned that there were certain things that one shouldn't ask about, so not to flee from one's own personal legend. I promised that I would make my own decisions, he said to himself, but the stones had told him that the old man was still with him, and that made him feel more confident. He looked around at the empty plaza again, feeling less desperate than before. This wasn't a strange place, it was a new one. That's a good way to look at life. After all, what he had always wanted was just that, to know new places. Even if he never got to go to the pyramids, he had already traveled further than any shepherd he knew. Oh, if only they knew how different things are. Just 2 hours by ship from where they are, he thought. Although his new world at the moment was just an empty marketplace, he had already seen it when he was teeming with life, and he would never forget it. He remembered the sword. It hurt him a bit to think about it, but he had never seen one like it before. As he mused about these things, he realized that he had to choose between thinking of himself as a poor victim of a thief and as an adventurer of a quest of his treasure. I'm an adventurer looking for treasure, he said to himself. If you take time and think about when he was back at the marketplace, when Santiago was back at the marketplace, it makes me think about the time when who did he meet? Who did he meet? Oh, the story of when the kid, I guess, met the wisest man. And then he told him to walk around his palace with the oil or whatever. I guess his money was the oil and the what's it called? The bazaars, I guess, around where the tapestries on the wall and everything that he finally looked at, but he didn't look at the oil, so he spilled the oil. So that's that. He was shaken into wakefulness by someone. He had fallen asleep in the middle of the marketplace. He had fallen asleep in the middle of the marketplace, and life in the plaza was about to resume. Looking around, he sought his sheep and realized that he was in a new world. But instead of being saddened, he was happy. He no longer had to seek out food and water for the sheep. He could go in search of his treasure instead. He had not a cent in his pocket, but he had faith. He had decided the night before that he would be as much of an adventurer as the ones he had admired in books. Damn right. He walked slowly through the market. The merchants were assembling their stalls, and the boy helped a candy seller to do his best. The candy seller had a smile on his face. He was happy, aware of what aware of what his life was about, and had already begun a day's work. His smile reminded the boy of the old man, the mysterious old king he had met. The candy merchant isn't making candy so that later he can travel or marry a shopkeeper's daughter. He's doing it because it's what he wants to do, thought the boy. He realized that he could do the same thing the old man had done, sense whether a person was near or too far from his personal legend, just by looking at them. It's easy, and yet I've never done it before, he thought. When the stall was assembled, the candy seller offered the boy the first sweet he had made for the day. The boy thanked him, ate it, and went on his way. When he had gone only a short distance, he realized that while they were erecting the stall, one of them had spoken Arabic and the other Spanish, and they had understood each other, each perfectly well. There must be a language. There must be a language that doesn't depend on words, the boy thought. I've already had the experience with my sheep, and now that's happening with people. He was learning a lot of new things. Some of them were things that he had already experienced and weren't really new, but that he had never perceived before, and he hadn't perceived them because he hadn't been accustomed to them. He realized, if I can learn to understand this language without words, I can learn to understand the world. Silence. Relaxed and unhurried, he resolved that he would walk through the narrow streets of Tangier. Only in that way would he be able to read the omens. He knew that it would require a lot of patience, but shepherds knew all about patience. Once again, he saw that In that strange land, he was applying the same lessons that he had learned with his sheep. All things are one, the old man had said. The crystal merchant awoke with the day and felt the same anxiety that he had felt every morning. He had been in the same place for 30 years, a shop at the top of a hilly street where few customers passed. Now it was too late to change anything. The the only thing that he had ever learned to do was to buy and sell crystal glassware. There had been a time when many people knew of his shop: Arab merchants, French and English geologists, German soldiers who were always well heeled in those days. It had been wonderful to be selling crystal, and he had thought how he would become rich, and how a beautiful woman at his side as he grew older. But as time passed, Tangier changed. The nearby city of Ceuta had grown faster than Tangier, and business had fallen off. Neighbors moved away, and there remained only a few small shops on the hill. And no one was going to climb the hill just to browse through a few small shops. But the crystal merchant had no choice. He had lived 30 years of his life buying and selling crystal pieces, and now it was too late to do anything else. He spent his entire morning observing the infrequent comings and goings of the streets. He had done this for years, and he knew the schedule of everyone who passed. But just before lunchtime, a boy stopped in front of the shop. Dang. Years. But just before lunchtime, a boy stopped in front of the shop. He was dressed normally, but the practiced eyes of the crystal merchant could see that the boy had no money to spend. Nevertheless, the merchant decided to delay his lunch for a few minutes until the boy moved on. A card hanging in the doorway announced that several languages were spoken in the shop. The boy saw a man appeared behind the counter. I can clean up those glass in the window if you want," said the boy. "The way they look now, nobody's going to want to buy them." The man looked at him without responding. "In exchange, you could give me something to eat?" The man still said nothing. The boy had sensed that he was going to have to make a decision. In his pouch, he had his jacket. He certainly wasn't going to need it in the desert. He was taking the jacket out. He began to clean the glass. In half an hour, he had cleaned all the glass in the window, and he was doing so. Two customers had entered the shop and bought some crystal. When he had completed the cleaning, he asked the man for something to eat. "Let's go and have some lunch," said the crystal merchant. He put a sign in the door, and they went to the small cafe nearby. As they sat down at the only table in the place, the crystal merchant laughed. "You didn't have to do any cleaning," he said. "The Koran requires me to feed a hungry person." "Well then, why did you let me do it?" the boy asked. "Because the crystal was dirty." "And both you and I needed to cleanse our minds of negative thoughts." When he had eaten, the merchant turned to the boy and said, "I'd like you to work in my shop. The two customers came in today while you were working, and that's a good omen." "People talk a lot about omens," thought the shepherd, "but they really don't know what they're saying. Just that I hadn't realized that for so many years I had been speaking a language without words to my sheep. Or to my sheep. Do you want to go work for me?" the merchant asked. "I can work for the rest of the day," the boy answered. "I'll work all night until dawn, and I'll clean every piece of crystal in your shop. In return, I need money to get to Egypt tomorrow." The merchant laughed. "Even if you cleaned my crystal for a year, even if you earned a good commission selling every piece, you would still have to borrow money to get to Egypt. There are thousands of kilometers of desert between here and there." There was a moment of silence so profound that it seemed the city was asleep. No sound from the bazaars, no arguments amongst the merchants, no men climbing to the towers to chant, no hope, no adventure, no old kings or personal legends, no treasure, and no pyramids. It was as if the world had fallen silent because the boy's soul had. He had sat there staring blankly through the door of the cafe, wishing that he had died, and that everything would end forever at that moment. The merchant looked anxiously at the boy. All the joy he had seen that morning had suddenly disappeared. I can give you the money you need to get back to your country, my son, said the crystal merchant. The boy said nothing. He got up, adjusted his clothing, and picked up his pouch. I'll work for you, he said, and after another long silence, he added, I need money to buy some sheep. Ooh! My dog. My dog Santiago. Well, all right, everybody. That was. Now we are on part 2. If I am correct. Yep, we are on part 2. On the recap, at the end, he had been staying in this new town now, watching people and watching the comings and goings of everybody else. And then he noticed a crystal shop merchant who lived up there, who lived on top of the hill. He went up there, cleaned his windows, found out. See, this is the part I want to go back and reread this part actually. Okay, so I did read that part, right? Damn. I know that feeling. I know that feeling of being told that he said the merchant he said I need money to get to Egypt tomorrow. The merchant laughed. Even if you cleaned my crystal for an entire year, even if you earned a good commission selling every piece, you would still have to borrow money to get to Egypt. There are thousands of kilometers of desert between here and there. At that moment of silence, that moment of silence was so profound. I remember I was in when I got stranded or lost in New Orleans for Mardi Gras or whatever. And then I asked I guess the Mountie, I guess is the cop on a horse. I said, "How far is it from here to the Greyhound? I guess Highway 5." And he was like, "Oh yeah, you see that building that's way over there?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Oh, it's like 7 miles past it." I was like, "Damn." But realistically, I was in a place where I've never been before with no cell phone and no money. All I had was a little bit of weed and a hustler's mentality. So what did I do? I started walking. I started walking. Tune in next time, and we will start part 2 of The Alchemist. I am D_pad. Like it and share it, please. Don't mind my hair. I'm growing my dreadlocks back out. Check out my Instagram.